I don't remember exactly when it started, when my glances lasted too long, or when his touch started to linger. Maybe it was that Tuesday morning he walked out of the bathroom shirtless, towel slung around his neck, asking if I wanted pancakes like it was the most normal thing in the world. Or maybe it was before that months back, when we were sitting on the floor of our apartment after his ex left him, and he said he felt hollow, like there was a fog inside his chest where feeling used to be. Back then, I told myself I was just being a good roommate, a good friend, someone who stuck around when others wouldn't. But deep down I knew better. My name's Daniel. I study architecture, work weekends at a coffee shop that smells permanently of roasted hazelnut, and spend my nights sketching skylines on napkins I never throw away. I've lived with Nate for almost 2 years. He's majoring in film production more. Specifically, he wants to direct indie documentaries. It's a kind that make you cry without knowing why. He has this way of noticing the quiet in people. Maybe that's why I fell for him without even realizing it. Nate's always been straight, or at least that's what he's always said. And I never pushed it. I never wanted to. Not when it meant risking everything we had. This weekend, we were. Invited to a cabin just outside the city, one of Nate's friends from film class had booked it for a small getaway. 3 days off, grid surrounded by pine trees and a lake that looked like glass in the early morning. Most of the others had bailed last minute, so it was just us and one other couple who'd be showing up late, which meant, for the first 24 hours, it'd be just me and him. The drive up was quiet, but not in a bad way. He had one hand on the wheel, the other playing with the bracelet. He always wore just a simple leather band, slightly frayed on the edges. I watched the way his jaw flexed when he concentrated on the road, how he hummed along to the music when he thought I wasn't listening. You ever think about just disappearing? He asked at one point, eyes still on the road. I blinked. Like off the grid? He nodded slowly. Not forever, just for a while. Somewhere no one expects anything from you. That was the first sign. Not a warning, exactly. More like a shift. A soft cracking open. By the time we reached the cabin, the sun had dipped low enough to paint the trees in gold. Nate grabbed our bags while I unlocked the front door. It smelled like cedar and dust inside, used but somehow familiar. There were 2 bedrooms, a fireplace, and a stack of board games from a decade ago. We ended up settling into the living room. He threw a blanket on the floor, and we sat cross-legged with mugs of hot chocolate and an old horror film playing in the background. He kept leaning into me when the movie got tense, but neither of us acknowledged it. Just laughed like it didn't mean anything, but I noticed how his knee pressed against mine and stayed there, how he let his arm graze mine again and again, like he was testing something invisible between us. And then, right before we called it a night, said it softly, almost like a question he was asking himself. I've been feeling numb lately. It's turned to look at him, but he didn't meet my eyes. He added, like I'm here, but not really. I wanted to ask what he meant. If he was okay, but something in his voice made me pause. There was weight to it. Like he wasn't just talking about his emotions, he was asking me something. Reaching out in a way that felt unspoken and fragile. Didn't answer. But I didn't look away either. Nate and I met in our sophomore year. We weren't assigned roommates. We ended up sharing an apartment because we both replied to the same online listing. I remember walking into that open house and seeing him standing by the kitchen sink, holding a measuring tape like he was pretending to care about counter space. He looked up, gave me this lazy grin, and said, "You cook?" I shrugged. "You wash dishes?" Moved in 2 weeks later. From the beginning, things with Nate were easy. We didn't have to try. We'd make late-night nachos and argue over which movie trilogies were overrated. He'd fall asleep on the couch halfway through documentaries and wake up blaming me for not pausing. Somewhere between all that, we just clicked. He wasn't like most people. He noticed the little things like how I chew the inside of my cheek when I'm stressed, or how I always sketch with my left hand even though I write with my right. And I knew him in ways most people didn't. I knew he sang in the shower only when he was happy. That he picked at his cuticles when he was trying not to cry. That he always left the porch light on if he knew I'd be home late. Our connection wasn't loud or dramatic. It lived in the in-between moments. The comfortable silences, quiet loyalty. It was enough to make me fall for him and painful enough to keep it buried. That first night at the cabin, we stayed up too late watching bad TV and playing cards on the living room floor. Beat him 3 times at blackjack before he accused me of counting cards. We made grilled cheese sandwiches that were half burnt, and he claimed it was a rustic aesthetic. I called him a disaster. He called me dramatic. There was a rhythm to us. And even here, out in the middle of nowhere, it followed. The next morning, we decided to hike the trail behind the cabin. Nate packed a thermos of coffee and a questionable amount of trail mix. I grabbed a blanket and a sketch pad. The sun filtered through the trees as we walked, the air crisp and full of pine. Nate tossed a pinnacone at me at one point, and I retaliated by pushing him into a pile of leaves. We laughed like we were 12. "You always this violent on nature walks?" he asked, brushing leaves off his hoodie. "Only when provoked." Grinned. Noted. By the time we reached the lake, we were out of breath from more laughing than walking. We sat near the edge, our feet just brushing the water. Nate stretched out beside me, arms behind his head, and closed his eyes like he belonged there. "I used to come to places like this as a kid," he said softly, before things got complicated. I looked at him, but he didn't elaborate. "So," I just said, "it's nice here." He nodded. "You ever wish we could just ... pause time?" "Every day." He opened his eyes and looked at me for a beat longer than necessary. My heart jumped. I looked away, pretending to doodle in my sketch pad. But I could still feel the warmth of his gaze on my skin. The complication came that night. We hadn't checked the guest room situation properly. Turns out the second bed was missing a frame. It was just a bare mattress in the corner, sunken in, and probably home to several generations of spiders. We stood in the hallway staring at it like it might fix itself. We waited long enough. "I can take the couch," I offered quickly. Nate shook his head. "Nah, it's got that weird dip in the middle, remember? I'd wake up shaped like a shrimp." I smiled. "So what? You want a rock, paper, scissors for the decent bed?" He hesitated. Then, in that low, casual voice he used when he was hiding nerves, said, "We've shared before, haven't we?" It was true. Movie nights, post-party crashes. One time when the heat went out and we piled into my bed with every blanket we owned. But this felt different. "Yeah," I said, trying to sound just as casual. "It's no big deal." That night, as we lay side by side, something felt too still. We kept to our own sides of the bed, too careful not to touch. I could hear his breathing slow, steady, and I knew he wasn't asleep. Neither was I. "You okay?" I asked softly into the dark. He was quiet for a moment, then said, "I'm just tired, but not sleepy, you know." I did know, because I was tired too of pretending, of feeling too much and saying nothing. I turned to face the ceiling. "I get that." A long silence stretched between us, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was full of things we weren't saying. Eventually, Nate whispered, "You're the only one I can just be quiet with, not feel like I have to fill the space." I smiled, though he couldn't see it. Maybe that's the best kind of noise. Let out a breath that sounded almost like a laugh. "Yeah, maybe." His arm brushed mine accidentally. I thought, but he didn't move it away. Neither did I. And even though nothing had changed on the surface, everything felt just a little different. Just enough to notice. Just enough to hope. The plan was to take the canoe out for a quiet hour on the lake before sunset. Nothing elaborates, just some floating, maybe a few dumb conversations, and then back to the cabin in time to heat up the leftover pasta we'd made the night before. Nate was the one who insisted. "We never do stuff like this," he said, tossing a life jacket at me. "Be spontaneous for once, Daniel. You're literally the least spontaneous person I know. That's because you only know me during exam weeks." He grinned and I rolled my eyes, but followed him anyway. The lake was glassy, the kind of still that makes every sound echo just a little. I sat at the front sketch pad in my lap, while Nate rode with an easy rhythm behind me. I could hear the water breaking with each paddle stroke. Too peaceful for how loud my head was, every now and then. He'd say something, usually a half joke, sometimes a question that hovered too close to something personal. Like when he asked, out of nowhere, do you think people ever really know what they want? I turned to look at him. You mean in life? Life, love, the whole mess? I hesitated. I think we know what we wish we wanted. It's not always what we actually need. He was quiet for a while after that. We floated until the sun started to sink, and I tapped my watch. We should probably head back. He nodded, pulling the oars back into motion. But less than 5 minutes later, the canoe jerked awkwardly and tilted slightly to the right. What was that? I asked, glancing over the edge. I think we might have scraped something. Like what rocks know? Something worse? Pulled the oar up. It was cracked, nearly snapped in half. I stared at him. You brought one paddle? I brought two, he said defensively. But the other one's back at the dock. I didn't think we'd be out here long, seriously. He gave me a sheepish look. We tried to maneuver with the broken oar for a while, but the canoe just kept circling lazily. The shore was visible, but too far to swim with backpacks and gear. The air had dropped just enough to turn the waters. Surface cold and uninviting. Great, I muttered, pulling my hoodie tighter around me. We're stuck. Not stuck, just paused. I gave him a look. That's not a thing. He shrugged. It is now. Eventually we gave up and let the canoe drift closer to a small inlet near the trees. Nate pulled us in with his hands, grabbed the rope, and tied us to a half-submerged tree trunk like he'd done it 100 times before. There was no cell signal. The nearest cabin was over a mile across the lake. Our only option was to wait it out and try to fix the paddle with duct tape once the canoe dried a bit. So we sat side by side, the canoe gently swaying. The sky had turned a hazy pink and orange. Bugs hummed in the distance. Everything felt like a waiting room before something important. I shifted to stretch my legs and our knees bumped. Neither of us moved. So, he said eventually, voice, lower now. You ever think about what your life would be like if just one thing had been different? Like what? Like, if we hadn't met? I turned slowly to look at him. I think I'd be lonelier. He looked at me for a second longer than necessary. Yeah, me too. My heart did that stupid tight squeeze thing it always did. Around him, like it wasn't sure whether to race or stop entirely, I looked down at my hands, then back at the lake. The canoe shifted again, bumping slightly against the tree. Nate steadied it with one hand and, that's when it happened, he moved closer. Not on purpose, maybe, or maybe a little. His thigh pressed lightly against mine, his shoulder barely brushing mine. It wasn't dramatic, but I felt it like a rush of heat. He didn't pull away. I should have. I should have laughed, changed the subject, done anything to diffuse the static. In the air instead, I asked, too softly, you cold? He shook his head. No, just kind of wired. From what I don't know. Everything. Then silence. The kind you feel more than hear. The kind that presses into your skin. Could feel his breath now, slow and controlled, like he was holding something back. And I wasn't sure if I was supposed to speak or stay quiet, so I stayed quiet, and then he said, without looking at me, sometimes I wonder if what I feel is wrong, or if I'm just scared of what it might mean. I felt like the wind had been knocked out of me. My throat tightened. My chest burned with every heartbeat. I didn't know what to say. I didn't want to push. But I also didn't want to pretend I didn't hear the tremble in his voice. Maybe it's not wrong. I said finally, just new. He glanced at me. His eyes were glassy in the dim light, and new is terrifying. Yeah, another pause. Another ripple of air between us. Then Dash's hand brushed mine. Slowly, casually, like a test. I didn't move. He didn't move either. It stayed there between us. Warm, barely touching. But enough to make me want to lean in, say something. Brave. Do something I couldn't take back. But I didn't. I just whispered, you're not the only one who feels. Confused, he turned toward me, and our faces were close now. It's close to be casual. I could see the way his mouth parted slightly, the flicker of emotion behind his eyes. What are we doing? He asked, like he genuinely didn't know. Gave the only answer I had. I don't know. But I don't want it to stop. He looked at me for a long time. Long enough for the sky to darken behind him. Then he nodded slowly. Me neither. We didn't kiss. Not yet. But something shifted permanently. We sat in silence until the stars came out, his shoulder against mine, our hands still barely touching, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I had to hide. We made it back to the cabin the next morning after an awkward, mostly silent paddle across the lake with a hastily duct-taped oar that barely worked. Nate didn't say much, but he stayed close hovering when I jumped out of the canoe, brushing against me when we unpacked our gear, handing me a towel without being asked. There was a kind of careful attention in everything he did, as though he was afraid of scaring me or himself. Back inside, I tried to focus on simple things. Boiling water for tea, plugging in my phone, pretending I didn't still feel the ghost of his fingers near mine, but the silence hung thick. Not heavy exactly, more like pressure, building behind glass. One word, one slip, and everything would shatter. That evening, the couple who was supposed to join us finally texted the date. Decided not to come at all. Something about car trouble and bad timing. Nate read the message out loud, then tossed his phone on the counter. So, he said, voice neutral, looks like it's just us. Just us. He said it like it didn't mean anything, but it did. We both knew it did. We spent the rest of the evening half pretending to be normal. We played cards again, made more grilled cheese, watched half a movie neither of us cared about. But our hands never touched. Our eyes didn't linger. We acted like yesterday hadn't happened, but every silence felt louder than it should. Around 11 p.m., I stood to head to the bedroom. I felt shaky, like my body was too aware of his. Of being alone with him in this place where the walls creaked. And the fire was the only light left. I think I'm going to crash, I said, barely meeting his eyes. Nate looked up from the couch, his expression unreadable. Hey, wait. I turned. He rubbed his palms over his jeans, then stood slowly. Can we talk for a sec? Sure, my voice came out tight. He stepped closer but didn't bridge the final space between us. I don't want to leave things weird. After the lake, after what I said. I swallowed. You didn't say anything wrong? He nodded, but he wasn't convinced. Still, I feel like I owe you something. Some kind of explanation. I waited. I wasn't lying, he said finally. When I told you I've been feeling numb lately, like I've been walking through my life wearing 10 layers and nothing touches me. Not people, not moments. It's not even the stuff I used to care about. His voice cracked a little. But when I'm with you, I don't know. It's like I feel things again. I stared at him. My chest was tight, my throat dry. He kept going, voice softer now. You make me feel seen, Daniel. You always have. I don't know what that means or if I deserve it, but it's real. And I think I've been scared of that. I stepped closer, half a breath. Scared of me? No. Scared of what I feel when I'm around you. He laughed once, bitter and nervous, which is dumb, right? Because I've dated girls my whole life. I'm the guy who brings back takeout and talks about dumb movie facts. I'm not the guy who feels this way. His eyes finally met mine, but I do. Silence, and then I said it, my voice quiet but steady. You're not the only one. Exhaled slowly, like he'd been holding his breath for days. I thought it was just me, he admitted. It wasn't. Another pause. But now, the air felt different, warmer, braver. I looked at him fully, his face flushed with fear and something like hope. His hands clenched at his sides like he was grounding himself. I tried to convince myself for months that it was just comfort, I said. That what I felt for you was gratitude, friendship, familiarity, but it's more. And I was terrified. You'd never feel it too. I didn't mean for it to happen, he said, voice rough. I didn't wake up one day and decide I was going to fall for you. Hearing the word fall made something twist in my stomach. He ran a hand through his hair. But now that I have, I don't want to pretend I didn't. We were standing so close now that I could hear every uneven breath he took. I'm scared, he whispered. I nodded. Me too. He looked at me, searching my face like he was trying to memorize it. What do we do with this? I hesitated, then stepped forward just a little. We stopped running from it. He blinked. What if I mess it up? Then we figure it out together. And then it happened. Tentative. Careful. He reached up and touched the side of my face like he wasn't sure I'd let him. His fingers brushed my cheekbone, and I leaned into it, just slightly, just enough. His hand trembled. And then I did it. I leaned in. Not quickly, not confidently. Like I was asking a question I'd never dared speak out loud, and he answered. His mouth met mine, soft and unsure, and full of every unspoken thing we'd carried between us for so long. It wasn't a movie kiss. It wasn't perfect or practiced. It was honest, fragile, and absolutely real. We pulled back slowly, eyes still locked. He let out a shaky breath. "Okay," he whispered. I smiled, heart pounding. "Okay, yeah. I want this." He looked down, then back up. "I want you." There was no clever reply. No dramatic music swelling in the background, just the quiet hum of the fire, the rhythm of our breathing, and the sound of something inside me finally settling. We stood there for a long time, forehead to forehead, his hands in mine, saying nothing, because everything had already been said. We didn't go to bed right away. After the kiss, after that soft, halting moment where everything finally cracked open, we stayed curled up on the old couch under a too small blanket, legs tangled, shoulders brushing. The fire was low and flickering, casting warm shadows over Nate's face. He looked different now. Not in any obvious way, but unguarded, like something inside him had stopped fighting. "So," I said quietly, "is this the part where we pretend it never happened?" He snorted. "God, no." I nudged him with my elbow. "Just checking. You've got that guilty puppy look. I do not. You do. Right now, full-on retriever remorse?" He smiled, looking sideways at me. "Okay, maybe a little. Not because I regret it, I don't. But because this is new territory, like full-blown Maples' wilderness." I nodded, biting the inside of my cheek. "You're not the only one figuring it out." He reached down and intertwined his fingers with mine. Are we going to talk about what this means? Or just keep making weird metaphors? Both, I said. I'm an architecture major, not a therapist. He laughed again, softer this time, and let his head drop back against the couch cushion. We sat in silence for a bit, but this time it felt easy. There was nothing left to hide, no more guessing games or what-if glances. Eventually, I turned toward him. "Can I ask you something?" Nodded, double quotes, "When did you know?" "I really know." He was quiet for a moment, then said, "Remember that night a few months ago, when I found out about my ex and that guy from her class?" I nodded. "You stayed on the couch. Didn't talk to anyone for a week." "Yeah, that week." "You made grilled cheese and left it on the nightstand. Every day. Even when I didn't say a word to you, even when I didn't deserve it. You're allowed to grieve," I said. "I know," he replied. "But that wasn't what hit me. It was how I felt when you were near. I wasn't thinking about her. I was thinking about you. How you looked at me. How safe it felt. And I kept asking myself, why do I feel more comfort in my roommate's silence than I ever did in my girlfriend's arms? That made my throat tighten. And that scared me," he added. "It still does, because I've never wanted someone like this before." I squeezed his hand gently. "It's okay to be scared. I am too. But I don't want to run from it anymore." He turned to face me, expression serious now. "I don't know what comes next," he said, "but I know I want you in it. However this unfolds, I want to try, for real." I smiled. "Then we try. No timelines, no pressure. Just one moment at a time." He let out a breath like it was the first full one he'd taken all day. "Okay? One moment at a time." Then he leaned in again, this time with less hesitation, and kissed me. Slow and steady, like a promise. We stayed up for another hour, sharing stories we hadn't told each other before. About growing up, about past heartbreaks. He confessed. He used to write poetry, but never showed anyone. I admitted I still had the napkin drawing he once accidentally called the prettiest thing I've ever seen. He blushed when I said that, which made me grin like an idiot. At some point, he curled into my side, head resting just beneath my jaw, arms slung lazily over my stomach like it belonged there. His fingers tapped gently against my hoodie in a rhythm I couldn't quite place. Is it weird? He murmured that this feels easy? No, I said. It just means it's right. A beat passed. Then he asked, what about back home? When we're not in this perfect little bubble, I exhaled. We'll figure it out. Maybe people notice. Maybe they ask. It's awkward sometimes. He tilted his face up toward mine. Not unless you need time. He considered that, then shook his head. No, I've hidden enough of myself already. That felt like the bravest thing he'd said all night. We eventually moved to the bedroom, not for anything dramatic, just because we were tired. We lay. On the same side of the bed this time, arms tangled, legs warm beneath the blankets. He fell asleep first, fingers still laced in mine. I stared at the ceiling for a while, heart full in a way I couldn't explain. Not with words anyway, just a quiet knowing, whatever tomorrow held, we'd face it together. And that was enough. We drove back in silence, but it wasn't uncomfortable this time, just quiet in the way that says, we've said what mattered. The trees passed in a blur as Nate drove with one hand on the wheel and the other resting on the center consoled close, not touching. Every so often, our pinkies would brush. He wouldn't pull away, neither would I. When the skyline of the city came into view, I caught him glancing at me. What? I asked, a smile tugging at the corner of my mouth. He shrugged, eyes back on. The road. Just making sure you're still real. I get that a lot, I deadpanned. He laughed. No, I mean all of this. You and me, it already feels like a memory I'm afraid of waking up from. You won't. He looked over. Again, this time more serious. Promise? I promise. When we pulled into our apartment complex, it was dusk. The light had that soft golden hue, like the world was holding its breath. Nate parked, turned off the engine, and sat for a second before speaking. So, what now? I turned to face him. And now we go back upstairs. We'll probably argue about what. To eat, probably burn something. Probably kiss between microwave beeps. He smiled. You think it'll be that simple? No, I said. But I think it'll be worth it. He leaned in, forehead resting against mine. You're terrifyingly good at saying the right thing. It's part of my roommate agreement, I said, smirking. Section 4, Subclause 2, emotional support and occasional poetry. That made him laugh again. But it softened into something else, something more settled. We walked up the stairs together, bags slung over our shoulders, knuckles brushing. When we reached our door, I paused, pulled my key out, but didn't use it. Instead, I turned to him. You sure? I asked, voice low. He didn't hesitate, just stepped forward, took the key from my hand, and unlocked the door himself. I'm sure. Inside, everything looked the same. The couch was still crooked from our last movie night. The kitchen sink still had the stubborn coffee mug. He refused to wash because he claimed it had character. My sketchbook was still open on the dining table, half-finished skyline waiting for me to return, but the air felt different. We unpacked in comfortable silence. I changed into my favorite hoodie. Nate pulled on the oversized flannel he always stole from me when the heater gave up. Then he sat on the couch and patted the space beside him. I joined him without a word. We sat there for a while. He rested his head on my shoulder. I leaned mine against his. The TV played quietly in the background, some nature documentary neither of us paid attention to. Then, out of nowhere, Nate said, Hey, next weekend, my cousin's engagement party. I was supposed to go solo. I raised an eyebrow. Are you asking what I think you're asking? He shrugged. Only if you want to. No pressure. Just, I don't want to pretend around them. Not anymore. My heart clenched in the best way. I'd love to. He looked relieved, nervous, but mostly proud. After a while, I reached behind the couch cushion and pulled out a folded piece of paper. I handed it to him. He opened it slowly. It was a drawing. The one I'd done of him months ago, when he'd fallen asleep on the couch with a book across his chest and sunlight hitting his face just right. I'd never meant to show him. He stared at it for a long time. "You kept this?" I nodded. "Always been you, Nate, even before I could admit it." He folded the paper carefully and tucked it into the back pocket of his jeans, like it was something sacred. Then he took my hand, not like he was testing the waters this time, but like it was. Exactly where his hand was always meant to be. "I don't know where this road leads," he said, "but I want you on it with me." I leaned in, kissed him softly, and said, "We'll find out together." The microwave beeped from the kitchen. We'd forgotten about the frozen pizza again. He grinned. Section 4, Subclause 3, burnt dinners included. I laughed. Better get used to it. As we got up to rescue dinner, his fingers laced through mine again, and this time didn't let go. Because this wasn't the end of something. It was the start.